Well, God was teaching me at all the time that ministry is needs-based. You find a need and you meet it. This is not complicated. This is not rocket science. You don't need a seminary degree. Hey everyone, it's Chris here with my co-host Rachel, and I am so fired up about this brand new series that we're kicking off today. Now, for the next few weeks, we're going to dive into some of the most frequently asked questions we get at Propel Women. Listen, I'd love to have a coffee with each and every one of you and answer every one of your questions. So basically, this is how I'm doing it right now. So this is going to be fantastic. And we're going to basically take on things like our purpose and calling, singleness, marriage, motherhood, transitioning through jobs and seasons of life. Basically, nothing's off the table. Rachel, that's scary. And
It is.
all the stuff you've wanted to ask. This is my chance where I get to answer some of that, especially stuff about being a woman in leadership and just really everything. So Rachel, tell me, nothing's off the table.
Nothing's off the table, which I'm so excited about. And I can't wait to hear where we go with this and dive into some of these questions that, I mean, they're so good.
Yeah.
They're so good. We're not staying surface level. And in order to get there, what we're going to do this very first week is we're going to go all the way back to the beginning, before you were even Christine Caine. Yes. Right? When you have a different last name.
I was Christine Caine.
Right. I mean, you didn't wake up, Chris, the global evangelist, leading a global human anti-trafficking organization. You don't wake up that way, right? So take us back to the very beginning. When did you first experience a call to ministry, and how did everything get started?
You know, when I think about it, I was 5 years old where I remember having a conscious memory. I was in church. I grew up in the Greek Orthodox Church. Mm-hmm. So in the Greek Orthodox Church, there's lots of pictures of saints on the walls, and martyrs. Now, I didn't know they're icons, like icons of...
Yeah.
And I just remember as a little kid consciously thinking, I want to get my picture on the wall. I mean, what do you have to do to get your picture on the wall? And then my mother told me that, you have to die and be killed. And so I didn't want my picture on the wall anymore. But I do remember as a little kid, even in church, having this sense of a distinct God awareness. And in my own thinking within the paradigm that I had, I wanted to work for God. Now, in my way of understanding for that would have meant being a nun, which my mother really couldn't reconcile. She's like, Christina, how are you going to be a nun? I was thinking I would hang out with the monks. I don't know. I didn't know what I was going to do. It was kind of like, how is this going to work? But
I don't think you could have been a nun.
No. But when you don't understand, I didn't even know what a Protestant was. I grew up in a very, staunch Greek Orthodox home. And so I can tell you that this God consciousness, this wanting to work for God, whatever that meant, and for me, I think I probably had a picture of a Mother Teresa. That would have been all my understanding was of that. That happened very, very young. At school, I had an encounter with God, a very genuine one, but I was so broken, Rachel. People know my story, that I came from a background of, childhood sexual abuse, and I was left in a hospital unnamed and unwanted when I was born, and so I was abandoned, I was abused, I was adopted. So as you could imagine, I was so broken. So somehow, I was so broken. So I had all of the trauma of that, and all of the pain of that, all of the brokenness of that, and this desire to want to do something for God, but I couldn't marry those two. Other people have this beautiful trajectory. They get saved and off they go, and it's up to the right and life is great. Mine was like this, up and down, up and down. It was round in circles, 25 steps back, 3 steps forward, 700 steps back, 2 steps forward. And they basically at 21, in a very kind of backslidden, broken state, on a balcony in Switzerland, running away from everything, in a very, very dysfunctional, ungodly relationship. I just remember sitting on that balcony, and just there is where I would say I just truly surrendered my life to Jesus. I thought I was coming back to kind of become a nun. It was like, okay, God, you've got my life. I came back and, you know, to cut a long story short, a friend invited me to a church. I'd never been to a church like this. Now I know that it was a Pentecostal church. I didn't know what it was. It was this church in a warehouse. And so here's me from the Greek Orthodox Church walking into this warehouse with kind of contemporary music and smoke machines and lights. And like, you know, I'm thinking, and this is the 1980s, I'm thinking like, did I just walk into a disco? You know, discos were the thing, rave parties were the thing. I've got no paradigm to think a warehouse with lights and smoke machines is a church. I'm thinking like, this is a rave party or a disco, you know, so I wish I went on to find out it was neither of those things. But I had the most radical, and that night that someone invited me and took me to church, the youth pastor, who happened to be a woman, who happened to be the only female youth pastor that was a woman in Australia, in all of Australia, she was for the first time giving a Sunday night message. So now this is my first time.
Oh my goodness.
I've walked into a church. There is a woman standing behind a pulpit teaching the word of God. And I can't put language around this for you, but I somehow I knew that's what I'm on the earth to do. Do you like that? That would be where it all started, right there.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, there's so many details on that I've never heard before. Switzerland, didn't know. But I know you ended up eventually in youth work. Yeah. Was it her that pulled you in?
Yeah, I think what happened was like she just sort of said there's on Saturday nights there's a youth meeting. Now I was 21, nearly 22 at that time, so I wouldn't have thought of myself as youth. Like so in my mind it's teenagers.
Yeah,
but because I didn't understand much about a Protestant church, I didn't know. I was the person. I got saved, so whenever the church doors are open, I'm there. Like, so, just like, oh, okay, that's what you do. Listen, what I was doing on Saturday nights, it was a lot better that I would be going to youth group than what I used to do. So, like sometimes I'm a big believer in sometimes you got to pluck someone right out of that environment that they were into or they're going to go back to it. So I needed something else to do on a Saturday night. Let's just put it like that. So this was like, I went to and I was that person, man. Whenever those doors were open, it wouldn't have mattered if it was the grandmother's meeting. I would have been at that thing because I'm like, I needed Jesus. I was so messed up. I needed Jesus. And thank God that, I got into a church that just always had something on. But she said, we are having a church cleanup day on Tuesday. So I went the next Saturday night to youth. And she goes, we're having a church cleanup day on Tuesday. Now, I just thought, when you get saved and you start getting into church programs, I just thought you do whatever they say. Like you got to understand, there was no no internet, there was no Instagram, there was no you didn't have an imagination of this is what I'm going to do. You're just going to do the next thing. So it's like, oh, well, I'm a Christian now. I'm part of this church now, and we're cleaning up now. So that's what you do. Like, it
makes sense to me.
That's it. I wasn't looking to arrive at anywhere. I thought I had arrived. Like I came to Christ. So I'm home. I've arrived.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking career Christianity. I didn't even know what a ministry was. I wouldn't have even known you could build a ministry. Yeah. I'm like, this is it. So now we're cleaning the church. So of course, out of the group of about a couple of hundred people that were there when she announced it, I was the only one that turned up on that Tuesday. And so this is how I say
everyone else.
Yeah, this is how God I'm convinced this is how God calls all of us, and who God uses is just keep showing up, because inevitably at some point nobody else is going to. So God has no other options, and so you're it. And so of course, if you've only got one person to choose, they don't need to be the best or the most gifted or the most talented or you're just there. And I'm still convinced with every fiber of my being that it is so much less to do with our ability than it is our availability. And every major invitation I've had from God has been more to do with my availability. I have never, ever, ever, not once, been the most gifted or the most talented or the best. I wouldn't be the best first choice for anything that I am doing. That's why I never feel stressed about it, because I know God put me there. And if God puts you there, God can keep you there. If you try to put yourself there, you've got to try to keep yourself there. And so as I was there and I went to volunteer for that church cleanup day, and the assistant youth pastor, who I still didn't even know anybody. I mean, I wouldn't have known the janitor from the pastor. Like at that point, I really wouldn't have. Like I knew nothing. Because the church I came from, like the priest was in robes and had, incense and candles. So unless you were like wearing your robes, I wouldn't have known that you were the head kahuna. And so I didn't know what anybody, in this one, everyone sort of wore jeans and everyone looked the same. So I wouldn't have known anybody from anyone. And he said, Christine, you're doing psychology. He goes, you're Christine Caine, aren't you? And I said, yes. And he goes, yeah, I've heard about you. And because,
all good things, right?
All good things. And, well, he would have even known. Like, I was just new, and it would have been, oh man, there's this Greek girl that just got saved and she's in church. And so, and then he said, you go to Sydney Uni, don't you? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, you're doing psychology. And I said, well, not really. I'm doing English and economic history. So basically I can read golden books and count to 10, but it's not that but I've got a minor in psych. And he goes, well, look, I just got a government grant. Our youth ministry got a government grant to start a youth center, a community-based youth center, to which I said, what is a youth center? And he said, I don't know, but I'm going on a missions trip with a senior pastor for 6 weeks. And we need to have a proposal done for this grant that we've just gotten, and a strategic plan and an outline. And because you're the only one that's at uni and you've got a minor in psychology, will you do this? So again, I'm thinking,
just because you were there.
Just because I'm there, this is what must happen. Okay, so this is God. I'm just thinking, of course, God's leading me because I'm now saved. I went to a youth group because they said there's a meeting on. And then I went to the church cleanup day because they said there's a cleanup thing happening. And now the youth pastor, who, don't forget, I come from like Greek Orthodox. So like if someone that's got the term pastor, priest, oh my gosh, they're like hearing from God. So it's like, okay, this is what the Lord must want me to do. Other people, they're praying and fasting, or they're scrolling, telling God what they want to do. I'm just like, oh, okay, this is how this must happen. God just directs you one step at a time. And so I just went. I didn't know what to do. So I went and visited every youth center. So they're all secular, every youth center in Sydney. And made meetings with the director of the youth center so that I could find out, what is it that you do? What is a youth center? What happens? Yeah, I'm doing economic history and English. I don't have a social work degree or a psych degree. And so out of that, you can understand how God's training me instantly at this point. No, now it makes so much sense. But back then, everyone's like, what are you doing? And out of that, I learned to write government grants. I learned how to speak to councils and government authorities, and how to speak to schools and teachers, and create programs for schools that were needs-based. What is it that your students need? That's where, we wrote anti-bullying programs and programs on teaching people about abuse and teaching people about just issues, eating disorders, teenage suicide, all of the major kind of issues, because we would, and then I would go and find out, what is happening with at-risk young people so that the community service could help provide services. Well, God was teaching me at all the time that ministry is needs-based. You find a need and you meet it. This is not complicated. This is not rocket science. You don't need a seminary degree. Yeah. I don't need to know Greek, Hebrew, or Aramaic, even though I do know Greek because it's my first language. You don't need to do it's not like a career. So while everyone was arguing about what can a woman do and what can't a woman do, nobody, God was calling us to lost people. We just went out because there's lost people, and no one really cares what you do. They don't care what you call it, whether you call it preaching, teaching, educating, because there's, lost people out there. And so that's where I learned. People go, where did you learn to preach? I didn't realize I was learning to preach when I was teaching 6 times a day in a high school. And let me just tell you, teaching in a church is 10 times easier because Christians will be nice to you. Unsaved Aussie high school kids, listen, if you say, don't care. Put up your hand they're going to put up their finger if you want Jesus. They are not going to say amen, sister. They are going to say lots of 4-letter words. None of them are amen. And so that's where people go, how did you learn to be so eloquent? I'm like, sweetheart, I was school. I didn't need a reformed seminary. I had unsaved kids in high schools in Australia. That's where did you learn to hold a crowd of arenas? Oh, you can hold a class of 14-year-old teenage boys that are unchurched. I can hold an arena. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like, this is where I'm laughing while everyone's like, I'm not getting an opportunity. I go, oh, there's plenty of opportunities. There are plenty of people that are lost in schools. And it's, I just think most of the stuff where we're wanting a career or a title or a position, I'm like, oh, There's lots of people. There's the
Yeah.
harvest field that God's called us to. Nobody's arguing over them. Nobody's even wanting to, and they're the actual ones that we're called to reach. So in all of that, I was being trained. I was being trained on how to run programs. Well, today people look at A21, 19 offices, 14 countries around the world, several president's awards, the Mother Teresa Humanitarian Award, working with the Red Cross, doing the work that we do around the world. Well, where do you think I learned to write grants? Where do you think I learned to talk to government departments? We do TEDx talks and TED Talks. And where do you think I learned to communicate to unchurched people? While other people were saying, you're wasting your life. Why aren't you building your church career? God was preparing me for what he already had prepared for me. He has not wasted one moment of all of those things when he was teaching me leadership and when he was teaching me faith and when he was teaching me how to believe God and how to reach the lost. Well, what is it that I do now? And, whether it's through Propel or whether it's through A21, it has a lot more visibility now. But the fact is, this is what I've been doing for 35 years. It started small. Zechariah said, despise not the day of small beginnings. I didn't know I was starting small. I just knew I was starting. I didn't know that was small because I didn't know this is what's happening. A lot of us, because of Instagram and scrolling, we're like, well, I just have to do this little thing now. For me, that little thing was a big thing. It just was the next thing. And what I'm doing now is just the next thing. And I'm going to look by God's grace 10 years from now and go, wow, that was little. We only had 19 offices. Wow. Oh, man, I thought that was big. That was only 19. Wow, we've only got, X amount of hundreds of thousands of women that we're reaching. Wow, I thought that was big, but that's small because we're reaching billions now. So that's kind of like you've only ever got the next thing. So it's not up to you to decide whether the next thing is a small thing or a big thing. It's just the next thing that God's asked you to do. And it's up to him to multiply it and determine whether it's a small thing or the big thing. But if we would just stop scrolling and swiping and we started doing, we'd get about the Father's business.
Yeah. I feel like there's 100 more questions that I want to ask you from everything that you just said. But I also know we have an entire series that's what we're doing. So as we are wrapping up this Q&A, some of the questions that I know you get the most often are about faithfulness in the seasons that we're in. Something you talk about so often is being in the here and not focusing on the there. And you've given us a little bit talking about doing just the next thing. But how can we best hold the tension of moving toward the dreams that God has put in our hearts while still honoring the season that we're in? We've got the big dream. But how do we honor this current season?
Yeah, I think there is no easy way. That's why we need to develop the fruit of patience. Scripture says, let patience have its perfect work in you so that you will lack nothing. And, no amount of pushing, shoving, competing, comparing is actually going to put you in the will of God any sooner than the timing of God. Actually, you don't want to be anywhere that God doesn't put you. Because if you are there, if you put yourself there, you have to keep yourself there. And that fosters more competition, more comparison. You're always looking over your shoulder. You're getting stressed. You're getting anxious. But it is God that opens doors that no man can shut. And promotion doesn't come from the north, south, east, or west. It comes from God. And I know not everyone wants to hear this. So you've always got to be preparing for where you're going, but you can only be where you are. And so, a few years ago, I went back to grad school and did our master's program at Wheaton with cohorts of women from Propel. Well, I don't really know where I'm going to use all of that right now, but I knew I needed to prepare, and it will come into play somewhere down the track. So I had to stay faithful and keep doing what I'm doing, enlarge myself to go, okay, well, let me grow in this capacity and then see where God's taking me to grow there. So, sometimes what you've got to do, and I know you're going to hear me keep saying this because I honestly believe this is the biggest issue. The more you could stop scrolling and swiping, the easier it's going to be for you to stay faithful where you are right now, because you don't need to feed that monster. You don't need to it just, Paul says, I have learned to be content. We don't be content by nature. You got to learn it. And, the longer it takes you to learn, the more discontent you're going to be. The more you try to push and shove, the more you're going to keep getting away from where God has you. So the more you can learn patience and contentment where you are, and pass
Yeah.
those tests, because there are tests to pass of character. And until you pass that character test
Yeah.
here, God can never take you there. And so do all you know to do, and then find your contentment in God, and you'll find a grace for this season in your race.
Oh my gosh. This conversation is so good, and this series is going to be so good. I'm so excited for what else we have ahead.
So am I. And I'm just jumping in, because basically we're only answering one question. We have about 4 questions per episode. So I'm just telling you all up front. At this point, I'm getting through one. So we will be doing Q&A until the second coming. There is no doubt about it. We'll be coming to the end of lots of different seasons and then doing lots of Q&A. So for a lot of you that are thinking, when is she going to get to my question? Don't freak out. We will get there, hopefully sometime before Jesus comes back. And here's the other side. If I don't get there by the time he does come back, you won't want to know the answer to it anyway. So you'll be fine. So anyway, make sure that you join us again, because we're going to get through these as fast as we can. But I want to be as honest as I can in these. I want to be as thorough as I can. So expediency isn't my goal. Just really getting to the core of it and helping to answer these as best as I can, to help give you tools to do what God's called you to do, and to help you remain faithful and fruitful in this season of your life. So I love you guys, and I cannot wait to get back to more questions in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure to subscribe to this channel to get notified every time a new video is posted. We are so glad that you're here and look forward to seeing you next week. God bless you.